Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to this episode of the Open Mic, and it's a fast-track start to 2019. And on today's episode, I'm going to be discussing a true entrepreneur's origin story, balancing entrepreneurship with mental health. We're going to be talking everything from fashion to storytelling and an awesome deep dive journey. This particular podcast has very special meaning to myself. As too many entrepreneurs often suffer and sit in silence, and I sit on a lot of boards as a non-exec and a growth coach. And I see, not just the young entrepreneurs out there, but some more seasoned professionals who, maybe when it starts to get tough out there, it could really affect them, whether it's at home or in business. And, mental health is a big part of that. And despite the UK investing over 115 million in mental health research each year, the Mental Health Network receives only about 5.5% of that in spend. So there's clearly so much more that as a business community and as a wider audience that we can do to help raise awareness of this. And, we'll do that through our podcast, and we'll get this shared, and we're going to put some links below. So, hopefully you guys can share this as well. And it's an absolute pleasure to have a young chap on the show called George Hodgson, who's not only going to share his journey with us, but he's also a campaigner for mental health and, does a lot of great volunteering work and a lot of good contributions to good causes. So, if you want to reach out to somebody and, you're concerned about mental health, I mentioned earlier, you don't have to sit in silence. We're going to put some links below, whether that's to great organizations like Time to Change, Young Minds, and of course the NHS. And naturally, these are just a small selection of the resources that are available. So please don't sit in silence, take action, speak about it, open up, and let's hope this podcast offers some value to you as well. In this episode, we're going to chat about entrepreneurship and mental health, plus much more. And I'm privileged to welcome to the show a real, truly inspiring entrepreneur, George Hodgson from Mason de Tube. Welcome, George. Thanks for taking the time to share your journey and your story, and welcome to the Open Mic podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mike. That was quite an introduction, and I'm looking forward to discussing, my journey, my story, my battle with mental health, and being an entrepreneur as a 22-year-old, and the struggles that also entails. So, thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. It's certainly fantastic to have you on the show. And as I say, it's a topic that I covered early in this intro that's close to my own heart, spending time in boardrooms with people. There's some great SMEs out here. And, this doesn't always have to relate to business. And I'm sure George will allude to later on. But I'm certainly looking forward to learning more from you. A little bit of background about George before I hand over to him. George's pedigree is a fashionpreneur, public speaker. Certainly part of what we're doing today here is mental health activist that he contributes to. It's certainly inspiring, and his dedication is pretty astounding, to say the least. All the way back in 2014, George founded the award-winning fashion label Mason de Tube out of his severe anxiety and OCD episode. The brand has since been recognized by the likes of Vanity Fair, which has referred to Mason de Tube as the fashion brand with a mental health cause at its heart. So please check that article out as well. And again, we'll put a link below in the show to promote that. Mason de Tube has also won the British Fashion Startup Award in 2016 for having such an inspiring story. And George's journey really since launching the brand has gone on to do public speeches, workshops in schools, colleges, universities, about how he started this fashion label from what we could only really describe as a dark place. George is going to tell a story of his battle with severe anxiety, OCD, not being able to leave his bedroom for 3 years. And I find this astonishing, but, having to wash his hands up to 50 times a day, all the way through to now being successful and running a fashion label full time. What I found when I connected with George the first time is he's incredibly honest about his suffering, and most people would hide that away in fear or embarrassment, but not in this case. You're going to get warts and all here. George is really going to do a deep dive, and he's going to talk about how everyone should be more open about their mental health, especially young men. I covered earlier, George works as Young Minds as a youth advisor on the Amplified program, giving workshops to professionals. And more recently, in August 2017, George became a qualified youth mental health first aider and received his first MHFA certificate of completion. What I'd like to raise the profile of, you can learn more about Mason de Tube at his website, Mason de Tube, which is House of in French, and then Tube, which is maisondechoup.co.uk. You can connect with George on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN George David Hodgson, and Hodgson is Hodgson. So welcome again to the show, George. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and hopefully I've done a little bit of justice to that background, but nothing better than hearing this firsthand. So over to you. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to take all the listeners back in time to July 8th, 2012. A little bit further than that, go back to school, is when I'd always had anxiety as a young person. I used to have it sort of extra support at home because I was so hyperactive. So I'm very hyperactive now still, but I used to have extra breathing exercises, counting exercises. But going back into 2012 at July, my friends and I all sat around in a tent. My friend gets out a small clear bag with a brownie white substance inside. And taking it in turns, we all snort MDMA from a £5 note. MDMA is ecstasy, essentially. And I didn't really enjoy the experience personally. It made me quite paranoid. I started hearing voices, and I was quite scared. So I sort of left that bit behind me. About 3 weeks after that experience, I was in the horse's field doing the dung, and I started feeling hot, started getting tunnel vision, hyperventilating, and I couldn't breathe, and I was sweating. So I ran inside. I thought, oh my God, I'm back on this ecstasy at my parents' house at the horse's field. What's happened? So I ran inside the house and told my mum that I thought I was on ecstasy right there. And she sort of looked at me quite confused, and I was running. She said, sit down, we'll talk about it. And I couldn't talk about, I couldn't sit down at all. I was running around the kitchen. I thought I was going to black out. I wanted to run away. And I didn't know what was happening at all. So we called Hansdoc, and Hansdoc said, George, it sounds like you're having a panic attack. And this is the first time I'd ever experienced one. And it was really, really frightening. It's so intense. It lasted about 45 minutes.
Wow.
Anyway, I started to relax. It lasted a long time. Anyway, I started to relax after that. And then, the next day comes along, and I'm taking a bit of a chill day, and I start feeling, hot again, getting tunnel vision, hyperventilating. I'm just lying in bed. And I have another panic attack that day. So I have another panic attack every day for the next week. And I'm sort of confused as to what's going on. I'd just left school. Through school, I was fine because I'd been busy, had a good friend school all the time. So I just left school and I was going into college, quite excited. But I was suddenly been reduced to this childlike state, having panic attacks every day. So I talked to my parents. My parents say, it's probably best we go down to the GP to see what's going on. And the GP says, it sounds like you've got anxiety and panic disorder. I'm going to refer you to CAMS, which in the UK is Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, run by the NHS. And the appointment's in 2 weeks from this day at the GP. So from the 2 weeks, my mental health severely deteriorated. I was still having a panic attack on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day. And the anxiety worsened, and I started watching.
Were they still running like the 45 minutes, George, or were they getting more or less? So if anybody's listening here, I think the first thing I'd just like to cover is we're not here to give professional medical advice.
Yes.
But I'm just trying to reference, was that, were they getting longer? Were they getting shorter, George, over this period of time?
They averaged to probably about 10 to 15 minutes after this. When I used to use a brown paper bag, which I'll come on to later, to calm down, stop me hyperventilating, and I carried the bag with me everywhere. So they didn't last too long, but they were intense in those short periods. And yes, I'd just like to add, obviously, I'm talking from my experience. Any recovery I talk about is just, it worked for me, it might not work for others. So the 2 weeks this happened in, and I was starting to wash my hands 50 to 100 times a day because I thought anything I touched had drug traces on it. So it could be my controller, it could be my 93-year-old grandmother's table. I actually thought I had cocaine or something on it. So I'd have to then go and wash my hands. Yeah. Otherwise, it would lead me to have a panic attack. And this was getting out of control. And it was becoming so exhausting that I started experiencing suicidal thoughts, intrusive thoughts. So this was just in a 2-week period. And the appointment comes along, and we go along to CAMS, and we get shown in by this lady therapist. She says, tell me what's going on, George, tell me what's going on. Then, I tell her I'm crying my eyes out, and she goes, it's okay, we'll be able to help you, we'll get you through it. There is one thing I must tell you, although, there's about a 40-week waiting list to receive this therapy, which sort of, the room fell silent. I left this appointment feeling far worse than going in.
Then when you went, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, mental health unit, going in, I felt far worse coming out, which is not exactly what you want. So my parents, we went back to the GP, and they said to the GP, is there anything we can do for him at all? He's now in a desperate situation, we're scared. And the GP just said simply, can you afford to go privately? And very fortunately, and luckily enough, my parents could afford to send me private, and so started my road to recovery. So I first saw a hypnotherapist, a child psychiatrist, adolescent psychiatrist, who was doing hypnotherapy with me to put through the sensations of a panic attack, get used to understanding that they were just panic attack and related to anxiety, as opposed to being on the MDMA every 5 minutes. So that was about a year and a half. Then I was also on medication, and then he referred me well enough to the CBT therapist, cognitive behavioral therapy, who was teaching me about anxiety generally, OCD, getting me to talk about it more openly. So with the CBT therapy, I was learning coping mechanisms to be able to deal with it. So I didn't have to rely on medication or the panic bag. And this was because inside my head, I was always catastrophizing, right? So if I had a headache, I didn't have a headache, I had a brain tumor. And this is the way my brain works. And some of us do it. So it was breaking down the thinking. So if you have a headache, I think it's quite a hot day, I haven't had some water, maybe I'm just dehydrated, and that will be the headache. That was the CBT. It was breaking down thoughts and trying to understand them more. So it took about 3 years to fully recover, and I had to leave college because I was too ill, and I didn't have a job because I was also...
So it affected your studying and your ability to sort of make that transition from school into working environments and your education. And so it's not that what you've gone through is bad enough, but there was a lot of other knock-on effects that I thought people don't always think about.
Exactly. My world shrunk. It really did shrink. I used to be popular at school. I had a big friends group, so I went out with them. I was about to achieve well at college in photography, and my world was getting smaller and smaller, along with my friends group and social life, and I'm eventually confined to my bedroom. So during all this time, I had so much free time on my hands. I used to write down and draw my thoughts and feelings in black notebooks, and I've got loads of these notebooks. There's one on my desk, and they're sometimes quite dark drawings. They don't really make much sense, and one of them was just a load of black dots on a page, and in the center it said help, because I didn't really know how to express myself. So my way of doing that was writing and drawing them down. As I started to get a little bit better, and I told my therapist and psychiatrist I was doing this, and they encouraged me to keep doing it as a creative way of outlet. And as I started to get better, I went down to Dad's office with him and started playing with these designs on Photoshop, manipulating them, add color, playing around with them. And as I did this on a weekly basis, I thought maybe I could do something with this. It's quite a cool design. I quite like it. And I thought I could, I was researching on Pinterest, and I thought I'm going to try and put this on a T-shirt. So I had the idea, and it was there, and I was dead set. And I said, Dad, would you laugh at me if I wanted to start my own T-shirt business? And he sort of said, no, go for it. Good luck. So I did. I bought myself a screen printing kit, set it up in his office, bought some T-shirts, and my God, it just went awfully wrong. I was so bad at it. I was a creative, but this just went terribly wrong. So I thought, oh my God, I've hit a brick wall already, but I want to make this project work. I want to share my friends and family.
So just at that point, George, you'd made that step, and like anybody, and it might have just been what we'd call a little home-based business, but it's still a big step to sort of say, I'm going to go and put myself out there, especially with the position that you'd maybe be, well, you certainly had been in for the previous 3 years or so. So did it damage your confidence a lot when it went horribly wrong? Or did that help you say, no, I'm now, did it help boost to make you more determined? I may have come in a little bit early there, but I just wanted to sort of, for the listeners, because it doesn't matter whether we're talking mental health, business or personal, when you've been in a dark place and you then sort of say, right, I found this out and it's going to help me go forward, and you believe in it so much, you'd obviously invested a few pounds in the screen printing and things like that, and then for it to maybe fall flat on its face or whatever, how did that affect you?
Yeah, so it did hit me confidently a bit. I went home that night feeling a bit down, but I think what this was doing, because I had nothing else to do, I became obsessed with it almost, because I'm a very... that was my focus. It became my focus on my project. And I thought, I'm going to make this work. I'm determined to make this work now. And almost because I was still a bit poorly, I wouldn't say I was delusional, but I was just doing the sake of doing it. I really enjoyed it. I thought, I'm going to do this. This is fantastic. So I did. And I researched around, and it took a while, and I found some printers that would be able to print them for me on some T-shirts. So I did. And I actually hit another brick wall there as well, because the T-shirts they printed them on were horrible quality, and they didn't accept outside T-shirts to print on. So I hit another brick wall. I thought, is it worth doing this? I thought, I'm going to spend a bit of time researching. So I found some T-shirts that I could buy, and then they were good quality after a long period. And I found a printer in London, and Dad drove me out there because I was still learning to drive. And they did it, and they looked fantastic, and they're on this nice quality. So we had the first collection, and it sort of flopped a bit. The first collection, the brand wasn't really known. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was sort of finding my feet, and I had this project, so I wasn't really taking it that seriously. It was just a bit of fun. But then I started to get better. I started talking about my story more, and how I'd just been doing these T-shirts, and people started engaging, and that's a great idea. That's fantastic. That's really interesting. So I thought, oh, okay, people are interested in this. Maybe I could try and sell some. So I did that, and I carried on, and I found someone who could, because my designs were so, I suppose, visionary or creative. They weren't very good to put on a t-shirt. So I needed to find someone who could fashionably, or not fashionably, but almost translate them and create the artwork to put on a t-shirt and better and simplify my pieces. So I did, and we would ship the bounce back ideas and throw back ideas, and we came up with one, and that was the Warrior collection.
Yeah.
And that then launched in 2017 now, in May 2017. And from there, we had a launch party because, as you say, I won the British Fashion Startup Award, which gave me some money and a loan for the business. We launched it at the party. And from there, it's really sort of started taking off, and lots of people are getting involved. And my confidence has grown from that. I sort of skipped a bit quickly there, but that's how essentially the brand has become more known, is the Warrior collection, and myself, because I realized that essentially the brand is me. I am the brand. And by doing my speeches, and by doing my speeches, I'm pulling the brand along. And I only started realizing by doing speeches last January, that I'd actually really enjoy it. I was terrified. The first speech I had was in Condé Nast College of Fashion and Design. Tommy Hilfiger's spoken there, Victoria Beckham, and I was really thrown in at the deep end. And I thought, oh my God, I'm terrified. But I did it. And afterwards, it was humbling. I got all the students coming up to me and talking about their own mental health. And by me speaking about it, it's almost opening a door for others to speak about it. So I realized that by using my voice, as well as using the brand, I can actually help other people and use fashion as a vehicle to raise awareness of mental health. And the 25% goes to Young Minds for, I suppose that's the next question, but 25% of the brand goes to Young Minds charity, and I can come on to that as well.
Yeah. So one thing that I'd love to explore a little bit more is, I've done the research on it as well, but in your words, the name of the brand, Maison de Choup, obviously the French element is House of, but talk to us a little bit more around the nickname and all how that came around.
Yeah, so I get a lot of French people coming up to me on the market stands and events I do saying, what does it mean? What does it mean? And essentially, yes, it's House of. And Choup was an emphasis to Charlotte when I was younger. I have a sister, she's older than me. And she is always there for me. She was always there for me when I was suffering. We're very, very close as a family. So it was a nickname for her. And I think it came from Charlotte, Poops, and I put it together and it forms Choups when I was younger. So I shortened it to Choup, and then it became House of Charlotte. So it's like a dedication of how close we are, essentially, yeah.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. And for us, we've got a number of businesses, but one of our businesses is called Gun Garaf Limited, so Gun Garaf. And that actually came out of my boy, Jamie, when he was really young. He couldn't say giraffe. He used to call them Gun Garaffs. So we've actually got it called Gun Garaf Limited, and that's one of our the consultant businesses. So I get it, and sometimes the crazy or the personal or the quirky brands just seem to go. And we've had that business for 14 years now, and it's still the time. So congratulations, and it's good because from a strategist, I mean, I do a lot of high growth strategy in our agency side. And really finding unique propositions to position brands with. And, if you just go with the normal brands, it's a lot harder, but you've got such a nice sort of triangle going off here. You've got the story in one hand, you've got the brand there, and you've got the mental health and the connection. It all pulls together, and that's why I think you've got the traction. Plus, obviously, you're very honest and humble about it, so I think people buy into that. So, just get it amplified and keep amplifying it, and hopefully, doing more of these type of shows and things like that will certainly help to do that. But that's a great story, and I think, just if you've got any questions for George, I'm sure George, he'll be more than happy to get those answered for them.
Absolutely.
You can look up George on LinkedIn or on Instagram, Facebook, which is facebook.com, and then you've got the Maison de Choup, and then same with Instagram.com, Maison de Choup. So you can do that there. If you want to shoot us a message on our preferred channel of Twitter, you can use the hashtag #TheOpenMic, and I'll get that forwarded on to George as well if you want to get that sorted. If you're listening to this on the app, that's fine. If you head over to blog.thesuccesshub.io /podcasts, we'll put a page up for George as well with all the links to the show. So if you're wondering about, hey, we've mentioned Young Minds and we've mentioned all these type of things. So we'll make sure that those links go in there so you can go and get those resources. Or, of course, just shoot George a message and we'll get those covered. So thanks, George. I appreciate that backdrop. And also thank you for being open and honest. I think that's a great way. And hopefully that invites other people to sort of, realize that they're not alone and there is an option to sort of go and get help. So congratulations on your success so far. I know how passionate you are about helping people succeed. And, the story there about speaking at the college demonstrates that when people are coming up and giving you that feedback, because it's an instant connection and it is. And I remember the first time I spoke on stage, going back to 2001, something like that. And I understand your knees are knocking, you don't know what to do, but you get up there and you're a couple of minutes in and away you go. But congratulations, please do more of that. So, this is going to be an awesome podcast as we're going to take George through a few questions here. So, let's understand how balancing entrepreneurship with mental health and how all that sort of knits together. Let's buckle the seatbelt, let's belt up and let's get started. So thanks again, George. And one of the first questions that I've certainly got is, we talked about what is the origin of Mason de Sheep and the reasons around the charitable contributions it makes. I think you've covered how it's grown out in the intro story. But tell us more about these charitable contributions, because, business in today's mind, it's all about bottom line. The fat cats get richer. And, we even play a bit of a part in that to ourselves. But for businesses for Vanity Fair to recognize that social conscience sort of, culture at its heart, tell us why Young Minds and tell us why you donate that 25% of the proceeds to that charity.
Yeah, of course. So Young Minds came about. So when I was ill, I used to, Google my symptoms, which is a terrible idea, of course. Everyone Googles their symptoms. It's the worst case scenario. But I used to do that and try and find if there was any other people suffering like I was, because I felt so alone. And I was scrolling down and I came across Young Minds website, and it was a very bright, breezy website. And then looking at the anxiety symptoms, I found that I wasn't alone and that they listed exactly what I was feeling, which I found comforting, and from that, I thought, I sort of kept using their website as a resource. And so when I launched the brand, I wanted to give back to a charity that helped young people, and specifically because I was a young person, I was suffering, but I was fortunate enough to receive private mental health care when there's so many young people that can't, and they're waiting those 40-week waiting lists.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give back to a charity that helped those young people, and they helped the parents as well. So I did that, and by launching certain designs in the collection, 25% goes to them from the sales. So it's super important to me that they grow as a charity, and obviously working with them now as a youth advisor and an activist, I'm helping them share their message as well, because the 40 weeks was terrifying. It actually turned out to be 2 years. I got a call 2 weeks before my 18th birthday saying they could see me now, which is obviously the cut-off point for CAM. And I don't want people to go through that same situation. So by donating parts of the proceeds from the charity to the charity, it's sort of helping them as well. And as a brand, they were very understanding. They loved the story, they loved the designs, and they're still quite small themselves. They've been going, the 25th year anniversary was last year. So we're almost growing together, and they were happy to be a part of it. And with the brand growing and starting to get recognition, we can obviously sell more and donate more to them. And it's become a great partnership as well. So that's why Young Minds is the charity. It's very close to my heart.
No, that's brilliant. And thanks for sharing that. And there is enough money in business today for probably more corporate sponsorship, or, whether you call it or whatever it would be. I know ours here at the successor of ours is the NSPCC, that we have it, and we make regular donations to that charity. That's something that's close to my personal heart. But if you want to learn more about Young Minds, you can visit them at youngminds.org.uk, and you can see that there. And also on George's blog, there's some links onto that there as well. So thanks for sort of covering that for us, George. That's a really credible and honourable thing to do. And it, as I say, from a branding position, it just fits well as well, which it complements. So no doubt you're getting that traction. So tell us a little bit more about how the creativity demands of Mason de Sheep sort of have helped improve your mental health. I know you've covered some things in the intro, but and the way you start to get those T-shirt designs out. But, from a therapeutic point of view and in your road to recovery and that, just talk to us a little bit more about that.
So with the creativity side of Maison de Tube, obviously when I was ill, this was my outlet. It was my creative outlet. We're a very creative family, and I get that from my parents, obviously. And I'm not academic at all. The creativity was my hotspot, and with these drawings and stuff, it became a focus. It was my outlet of energy. I was getting it out there. It was just out there in some form. This was my way of doing it. So by doing that and then continuing to do that and playing around on Photoshop, I subconsciously realized that my focus became off myself and on these designs and on this whole project. And creativity flows throughout the whole brand now, from the panic attack bags we send the products in the post to the designs of the handwritten cards we send along with it. It's all of these ideas come from myself as well as other people, and I'm just all about ideas, and that's what I love doing. And they're always really creative ideas, and this is my way of using my energy as an outlet. So it's obviously a very creative brand, and the story flows throughout all of it. And I'm always thinking of new ways of how we can gently remind people of how to talk about mental health through it. So with the designs, it's very important that they are subtle and non-triggering designs, but they still start that conversation. So the creativity is essentially all about the brand, and using my energy to focus on that really, it became, I suppose, one of the projects that helped me through my darkest times, because I was always putting all these ideas down and focusing myself. I wasn't worrying about if there was drug trace on the table, I was doing it.
Yeah, so it helps you focus, and it took your minds away from some of the darker things that were happening, and then like you say, you mentioned earlier about the little black books that you had where you started filling those in and then obviously transcribe. So just the basic ideas of you dealing with it as a therapeutic sort of way transferred then into the creativity side and then onto the front of the shirts. And if you visit masondeshoot.co.uk at the moment, love the t-shirt on the main image there. Two kids sat on it looks like a London townhouse set or something. I'm not sure if it is, but don't feed the fears. Yeah, don't feed the fears. I mean, all for slogans and things like that. And that's just something. So maybe slightly off script, George, and I apologize for putting it on the spot, but it's something that resonated with me straight out. I sort of missed the Making Mental Health Matter banner on the homepage. I'm looking at it here, but I just got drawn to Don't Feed the Fears because I thought it was so powerful. What was the origin story about that? And this is slightly off script, so apologies for putting you on the spot there, George.
Not at all, it's fine. Don't Feed the Fears is all about, with anxiety, always need something to focus on, right? So when it wasn't at primary school, it became this drug thing, and it focused so much on that. And I was only feeding it by sort of not giving into it, but with the OCD, I was sort of constantly fueling it. I was constantly washing my hands, which is only making it worse. And when you feed fears, they get stronger, right? Misery loves company. So when you are feeding the fears, they're going to grow. And I think it's the classic case of the faster you run, the faster it's going to catch up with you. So if you actually just stop, turn around and look at them in the face, they're going to get scared and run away. So that the essential message there is to just don't feed the fears, look them in the face and tell them to go away, and accept them. One of the key points that stuck with my CBT therapy is that you have to let thoughts flow through your head. Because we all essentially have a thought that comes through into our head. It sits in our brain area, and we then sort of spiral out of control because we focus on it so much and then delve into it and think, oh my God, what's going to happen? This is going to happen. If you let it just pass through your head, it will go. Thoughts come and go all the time. You can choose the ones which you want to stay and then focus on those more and act on those. But if you act on the ones that are fears, worry, anxiety, so I think if you let them flow and don't feed the fears, and it has to be strong and big and bold, because that's exactly what the slogan is.
Brilliant. No, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you for expanding on it. Unique brand, unique cause, all the things we've discussed so far. If we move on, explain the process of how you've grown the brand Maison de Tube and what mediums that you've used. So if anybody else is out there, not necessarily a similar idea, there's enough space for all competition, but what's your journey from getting those first t-shirts printed, the mediums that you use, the exposure? Obviously you've linked it with things like Your Mind. Talk to maybe a little bit how you entered into the fashion awards and things like that. So it'd be good just to see how, for you to explain in a bit more detail how you've grown the brand and all the mediums that's been in play.
Yeah, of course. So it's quite interesting when I tell my story, actually, because I have had no fashion knowledge and no business knowledge, and I was going into a fashion business and it was terrifying. So, but I am very Obviously, coming through my illness, I was a bit terrified when I first started the brand of how to market it. So that's probably why the first collection flopped. But as I started to grow more confident in myself and doing the speeches, I realized that I actually hate regret. So everything I don't do, I feel more than I do. So if I was at a party and there was quite a high profile person there, I'd go and speak to them. They could tell me to go away, but then I'd feel proud of myself for actually doing it. And I based growing, and I don't leave the party thinking, what if, because what if thinking really kills me. So I based growing the brand on that principle, right? So when I started the brand, I didn't have any money, really. Obviously, after the British Fashion Startup Award, we had a little bit of money. It wasn't a huge amount of money, and it certainly wasn't enough money to send to influencers and pay sort of £2,000 a post for. So when I launched it, I started just messaging about 150 people a day on Instagram, asking them to have a look, and I would send you a t-shirt, and the majority of the time about one would reply. It was soul destroying, but it only took one person, and I got a message back from a girl called Alice Catherine, who's a blogger, and she has about 200,000 followers, and said, I love the brand, I love the story, I actually sat for myself, send me a t-shirt, I'll see what I can do. And about 2 weeks later, I started receiving all these sales notifications on my phone, thinking, what the hell's happened? And she'd actually just posted a photo of her wearing it, and it sort of grew the brand from that. And I based growing the brand on just networking, taking risks that potentially things could go basically wrong. But I think the most important part is to take those risks, because growing the brand, and I've used it by Instagram as the main channel of growing the brand, LinkedIn second. I'm not very good at writing. I'm very creative, very visual. So Instagram is my platform, and I tell stories all the time. And on my personal Instagram account, I've grown a loyal following, so people can follow the journey, and I help them choose colors of the new embroidery stitches. And when it comes to fruition, that product, they feel part of the creation process.
The journey of that,
yeah. So and I've sort of grown the brand on that principle of obviously just meeting people, sharing the story, and doing the speeches. And it's been difficult because obviously I don't have a massive marketing budget, but it's just experimenting and trying new things all the time. So in terms of marketing and getting known, I messaged I'm very tenacious as a character, and I just do stuff sometimes without thinking. That's ignorance, that's being young. But I messaged the creative director of a very important communications agency in London and said, can I see him? And then about a month later or something, I got an email from his PA saying, he loves it, he'd love to meet you. And it's sort of these opportunities that you just embark upon.
You forge them, don't you? You have to cut through the ice sometimes and be that.
Exactly. And there was I went to a music gig in London and just to support some friends. And then there was a boy there, and he's talking to me about my brand and said he loved it. And he said, his mother, just left a big magazine in London. And it turns out she was the ex-fashion editor at this big magazine. And I said, do you mind if I have her email and ask her what she thinks? And from there, you build a network of people and contacts, and you sort of grow, and you just have to jump on these opportunities, because even if they don't come to something, at least you've tried. So with growing the brand, it's all about just taking risks, essentially. And another side of that is attending London Fashion Week. An interesting way, because obviously I'm a nobody in the fashion world in a sense. I don't really get many invitations, but some friends get the invitations, and I just badger people to get them. So what we do for Fashion Week now is we always create some unique pieces. So you love the Don't Feed the Fears. What we did for that is made a denim jacket and put it on a denim jacket in big orange, as well as like an orange puffer, and put it on white on that. And we went as a couple, or two of us went, just stood in front of street style photographers and got the message out there, gave people cards, and it got the brand talking about Fashion Week and mental health there. So it's just doing these small things that make the bigger impact. I think because you don't need a massive marketing budget to be able to do certain stuff. Obviously, it helps grow it quicker, but I don't want to grow too quickly, because what grows quickly collapses.
You've got to build the foundations for sure.
Exactly. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're building the foundations, building the groundwork, and slowly going up. So we've just launched our own podcast. It's about, with the brand, I'm not a salesperson. So with the brand, it's about telling a story and essentially building a community. So with the podcast, with the blog, with the Instagram stories, with the encouraging other people to open up, you're encouraging people to feel part of the community. And then if they want to buy something, they will buy something, because you can't force people to buy it. It's not something you can hard sell on the street. It's a sensitive product to sell. And they're not overly cheap t-shirts. So it has to be sensitively sold and marketed. And that's what the brand is growing on.
Yeah, that's great. And, and thanks for sharing that, George, for all, the people trying to get traction out there, whether it's with what I call a mainstream brand or a mainstream product, or you've got something, unique. I think the key message what George is also saying there, which I totally echo, is you have to force this. Yeah, you have to be cheeky in a little way to go out there. Not be a pest, but be bold enough and brave enough to say, I believe in my cause. It's good quality. I'm delivering value, and would you take a look? And great little, you may not see that, George, but it's a great little, what I call reverse sales technique there, where you sort of send people, you may be doing it subliminally, I don't know, maybe it's intentional, but when you say to somebody, hey, here's what it's all about, here's a story, if I send you, would you maybe take a look and give me some feedback? Because if it connects like it did with the blogger, bang, it ignites. And that's a lot better than saying, hey, I've got this charitable cause, or, here's my sob story that a lot of people will throw out there, please buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. It's just a balance. But getting out there, going to major events, putting your brand on your own gear and getting in front of cameras, handing stuff out, forging stuff, sending emails out, connecting and listening more than you speak sometimes for the opportunities. I find so many people listen to reply, where realistically people should start listening to understand. And if they listen to understand, then that's where the opportunities come up and the deal flow will come across your desk. So if we can support George's cause, please head over to masondeshoop.co.uk. The high quality t-shirts is a great brand there. And what we're going to be doing as well, we'll be ordering a couple off you as well, George, and we're going to put them out on a competition.
Thank you.
Things on the podcast. So if you listen to the podcast show, you leave us a message and we'll enter you in to get you some merchandise for George straight away. But that's a real great way of getting your product to market, using ideas, and without any mainstream marketing budget. So which is, congratulations, it's a great.
I think just one more point on that, Mike, is that built on all of that in a succinct way is people buy from people. People like buying from people.
Yeah, people that they know, like, and trust. A lot of people who listen to my podcast, I probably get that in every podcast. It's just one of those things that people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And ultimately, you're absolutely right. I think the only thing that I would say is, and it's not necessarily relevant to your particular situation, George, but I see a lot of people talk about referral marketing and recommendations. And that is essential in any business, to have that reputation and build your
word of mouth
advocates. Yeah. But the biggest problem is it ain't scalable or predictable. Whilst it's exceptionally valuable, if you need that consistent high acquisition and deal flow, sometimes the recommendations or the referrals, you can't predict when that will come into a forecast or a P&L, and it's not very scalable unless you have a huge community. But again, the community is a great idea. We have that around our growth engine product, and the podcast supports that from that side. And you're right, you expose, you give value, and for the listeners out there, the best sort of summary statement I can offer of that is ultimately always ensure that you give value before you look to extract value with the possibility of a sale. So give value before extracting value. Get your cause right, like George has done, and you're certainly going to be on a strong path to success. So that's a great story, and thanks for sharing those tips and techniques with us, George.
Okay.
Great work. And as we move forward, outside of the Mason Deshoop sort of business interest, tell us a little bit more about your interests. Obviously, fashion, I know, is one of them, but tell us a little bit more about your interests and your passions.
Oh, it's a good question. I've never really been asked it on a podcast. They always talk about the business. I love reading. I'm always reading, and that's my way of learning. I love reading, so I'm always reading. And obviously, I do have 2 horses, which actually helps through my recovery. They're very therapeutic. I went and spoke to them. But outside of work, when you ask, Mike, I don't really do much. It's all about the brand. I suppose I could add that I also work at Sainsbury's part-time in the morning from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., it sounds horrific. But it gives my day structure. I get up at 4 for sort of 2:45, go to work for 4 hours, and then I'm set up for the day because I've done that. That's just a cash flow point of view. From that, I do that outside the brand. I love driving and just generally enjoying nature. So outside of the brand,
horses. Tell me about the horses.
So the horses are called Spice and Rocket, and now they're like more pets. They're little small horses, but they're wonderful. They're calm, they're relaxed, and they sort of share that energy with humans. And I went recently to something called the Horse Course, which is using horses as therapy, and I firmly believe in that, because ours really helped me when I was ill. You know, they almost just listen. You can be with them, they're calm, they relax, and you can stroke them, and you have to be calm around them, otherwise they'll be all jumpy. So it's not, if you're not calm, they're not calm. So you have to calm down yourself, and I think that's really
for you. Yeah,
exactly, and you learn that. So I mean, I love the horses, but you know, I love music, and as I mentioned, this is probably quite a good value point worth adding, that obviously after first attending that festival and taking the drugs, I never thought I'd be able to go to one again because I was so terrified of them. But after 6 years, last August, in August 2018, I went to a festival in Winchester called Boomtown, which is quite a heavy festival in the drug way. But I didn't, you know, I had those anxious thoughts, left them at security, left the thoughts at security, not the drugs, because I don't take drugs. And I had a fantastic time, and it just shows that I can conquer my demons, because I do love listening to music, and I do love music and doing those events, because they're very exciting. So outside of work, you know, music, reading, I love, and my horses and my family, of course, who have been the support network.
You've got to get that balance, and I think it doesn't matter how hard you work. I was doing a call with a client this morning, and we were talking about burnout.
Yeah,
we launched 2 businesses in Q4 last year, and we run a piece of software which is our HR system software here called Bamboo HR. By the way, that's not a plug, and neither am I affiliate from that. I just happen to use it in our across our business ranges. And we were looking at the pay period, because we have to clock in and clock out on hours, and we track them. And 300 hours we did in October, and 276 hours in October working. Yeah. And that work-life balance just wasn't there over that period coming up to the end of the year. But we had got major pressures. And, you know, you look at the quality of the work that you put out, is it as good as it could have been? And sometimes if you just spread it a little bit more, get that work-life balance in there, you're going to feel a lot better. Because I know we were certainly on burnout at the end of
yeah, and I think that's a really important point, Mike, is that obviously with growing businesses, now this entrepreneurial spirit where everyone's hustling and, you know, working 100 hours a day and a week, and then you think, oh, that's fantastic, I want to be like that, I'm going to be rich. Money isn't everything. You know, I feel like legacy is more, but also if you can't look after yourself and your own mental well-being, there's no way you're going to be able to run a company or even be alive to do that. And that's what I realized, that sometimes when I do start to feel overwhelmed, because I most certainly do sometimes with the will email, doing events and stuff, I think the most important part is just taking a step back and recharging, because I'm you know, confident myself and strong enough to know that the next day after I've done that, I'll feel a lot better and stronger for it. So I think, you know, take a day off, relax, read a book, watch something, have a bath, because, you know, the next day you'll be able to tackle it a lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing that flashed through my mind. I've just checked it on here. I worked with a lady just on the horses front. I worked with a lady called Julia Felton a few years ago, and she runs, and please check her out, she runs a company called businesshorsepower.com. And Julia's a similar background to me. She comes from corporate, and I think she was ex-Anderson's actually in there. But Julia Felton, businesshorsepower.com. And what she does is she takes corporate clients into her farm area, and she does thought leadership. And using the horses and the experiences in the horses to actually highly motivate and power corporate teams and bring
amazing.
If you reach out to Julia, just let her know Mike from the Successor of Mike Midgley sent her on there, and it may be worth it. You guys may have some connection there as well.
Absolutely, no, it sounds fantastic. Always love.
And if anybody's out there as well who's interested in what Julia does a great job, creating high performance teams. Businesshorsepower.com. Check her out, and that'll be good. So as we come in to wrap up on the show, George, I know we've covered a lot of these, but I'd like you to sort of condense it into a specific section. The learning curve and experiences that you've gone, you've had highs, you've had lows, positives, negatives. Just tell us a little bit more about them in a bit of more detail, if you feel open to do that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the highs and lows are a daily occurrence. The lows are questioning my life choices and what am I doing. The highs are, this is amazing, this is going to be the biggest brand in the world. So there's no in between, but it's the negatives I encounter a lot, but the positives, someone gave me a piece of advice is to when you're having a bad day, look at how much you've already achieved, because it's important to do that, because I have I have achieved quite a lot doing my speeches and growing a brand and now launching the podcast. It's very easy to get stuck into the trap of the negatives. So if you are having a negative day, just look back at the positives, which I tend to do now, because it is hard running a business. There's no doubt about it. And it's very difficult and you encounter problems all the time. But, ask people's advice and don't be afraid to ask people's advice, because no one grows a business on their own. Everyone thinks they do, but they don't, and they've had advice. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and just look at the positives and how much you've already achieved, because it will. If you keep the positive attitude, it will continue to grow.
Celebrate the wins, isn't it?
And it's the small wins. It doesn't have to be massive wins. You don't have to reach a certain amount of turnover just to celebrate something. If you celebrate the small wins and have a positive mental attitude about something, you'll notice that the harder you work, and the more positive you are, the luckier you get. It's the basic law of attraction. When you're in a traffic jam or on a road, and you think, I really wanted that, because I found this with, I wanted a new car, I wanted a Volvo. I don't obviously want that anymore, and I started seeing Volvos everywhere. So the moment you start focusing something, it will start to appear everywhere. So I think it's important to always look at the positives. Obviously, the negatives will come, but just remember that you can tackle it, because you've tackled so many in the past.
Brilliant. Well, George, I appreciate you sharing your time and experience. Thanks ever so much for adding so much value. It's been awesome to hear your truly inspiring story. And again, if you want to learn more about George's brand, his causes and his business, you visit maisondechoupe.co.uk. That's maisondechoupe.co.uk. Connect with George on Facebook. You can do that at facebook.com, again, Maison Deschoupe, or on Instagram. Again, you've got instagram.com, Maison Deschoupe. LinkedIn is linkedin.com/IN/George David Hodgson. That's HODGSON. Please send them a message and, continue to support the brand. We'll certainly put a competition on for some of your swag, as we would call it. George, it's maybe a slang term for getting us some t-shirts out there. We don't want them sending, we'll buy them for sure. I'll let you make a recommendation of what you think is your best ones to do, and then we'll get those ordered. But as we start to wrap up on the show, what I always try and do, we talk and bounce around so much, and the feedback that we get from the listeners is, Mike, it would always be great for you to summarize like 3 pro tips or 3 things you want me to work on in the show. So if we're balancing mental health and the entrepreneurship, and whether you're in that dark place where you were a few years ago, George, or you've come out of that into where you're at, what would you say the sort of 3 humble tips or pro tips are that people should look at to make sure that they can, come out of the other side and, give themselves the best chance of, happiness and ultimate success in whatever they choose to do?
I think the first one, obviously relating to mental health, is it's okay not to be okay. That's my tip number 1. My tip number 2 would be to fail forward, because you are going to fail. There's no doubt about it. But if you fail forward into the next failure, you're going to get to success eventually. And my last one is, don't regret anything you've done, because that, as I spoke about, is important. And regret will only create what-if thinking, and what-if thinking will sort of screw you up. So I think it's important to, it's okay not to be okay, fail forward, and don't regret anything you do.
No, that's, wise words from a young man, and, incredibly inspiring young man as well. So keep up the great work, George. We're certainly going to be pushing and supporting you all the way. I'm sure the listeners will, find the story inspiring. And again, if you want to shoot us a message, use the hashtag #TheOpenMic, and we'll get those answered for you, or we'll get anything that is a little bit more specialist over to George. Of course, you can connect with George on the channels, and we'll put those links. Also, we'll put the links to Young Minds and people like that below in the show notes as well. So thanks again, George. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and for sharing story. It has been truly inspiring. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So as always, guys, we appreciate the work that you're doing out there at the coalface, and whatever state of mind that you're at, we appreciate you tuning into this episode. And as always, get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen, and we'll see you on the next Open Mic show real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.